joining us to clear the air on this situation and give us an update on what ultimately was found about whether or not his primary residence can be in West Bloomfield Township is our Township Assessor, Rob Scripture. Rob, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
I'm glad to have you on with us because this is an issue not only surrounding a public servant and a public figure, but really it surrounds the issue of primary residency. We know people like to live in our community, but also people like to come into our community and spend time here on their weekends or over the summer, beautiful times of the year. So let's start by just defining what primary residency really means.
Well, primary residence, what it means is it's your home that you occupy. It's your one true home. When you leave it, you intend on returning to it, and you can only have one to receive this exemption. This exemption really provides you a reduction in your property taxes. Specifically, it's a reduction to the school operating tax, the local school tax, and it's up to 18 mils, which is, if you put it in real dollars, it's for every $1,000 of taxable value, it's about $18. So it does add up.
And so ultimately at the crux of this issue was he has a house in West Bloomfield that he bought and he and his family had bought, and he also is required contractually to live out of the president's residence on the campus of U of M Ann Arbor. He did live primarily in West Bloomfield while there was some construction on that property, and that was approved by the University of Michigan. So now owning a home in West Bloomfield but being required to live in another home primarily because of your contractual obligation, I would imagine as you were looking into this issue that was probably at the core of what was being decided, whether or not that contractual obligation mandated that was his primary residence. So ultimately, when we look at this issue, what ultimately brought you to the decision that, looking into the details here, this is his primary residence right here in West Bloomfield?
So what's interesting about the principal residence exemption, it's an affidavit, it's a sworn affidavit that homeowners that own and occupy a property submit to the township. It's a state exemption, and they are stating that this is their primary residence. For example, we do have professionals here in West Bloomfield, such as firefighters, nurses, salesmen. They have a home here, but they are required to live elsewhere to work, and they may be away from homes, for an extended period of time, but they do intend on returning to their home here. This is something that the taxpayer is swearing is true when they submit this affidavit.
So then it's a matter in some ways of ownership too, because while, like you said, with the firefighter example, you may have a firefighter that lives in West Bloomfield but serves in another community. So they're spending a significant amount of time. They are on some days and many days of their week living in that community, but they own a home here in West Bloomfield and they intend to go back to that when they're off duty. Is that ultimately what kind of was the benchmark being served in this situation? Santa Ono is the president of the University of Michigan, so he's living out of that house on that campus because it's a contractual obligation, but this is his house. This is his residence that, should he leave the University of Michigan, he would come back to.
One of the misconceptions is that the assessing department, and in fact there is no department here at the township or even the state that tracks where everybody leaves to go to work every day and return. There's no log that does this. This is an exemption that is filed and claimed, and it's on the individual that claimed the exemption to claim it and to rescind it if it's not true. We do monitor occasionally. We do monitor for information for changes, such as like if this property does sell, we will look at the exemption to make sure it was removed. But for the most part, this is on the claimant to take care of.
So bringing that back to everyday residents in our community that are not in this specialized situation. No, they buy a home, they're moving into our community. When is the point where they should be declaring their home in West Bloomfield or even in another community under these regulations as their primary residence?
So the assessing department understands that the closing of a property is such a large investment, probably the biggest investment that most taxpayers have in their life. It's a daunting process, a lot of signatures. There are two forms that generally have to be reported to the township or the city that you live in, one of which is the principal residence exemption, the other one is a property transfer affidavit. It happens so quick, you're signing so many documents, but those are the two forms that generally they say bring it in, as soon as you can, or within 35 days, because that's the deadline for the property transfer affidavit. The truth is that you need to submit it when you move in. When you just because you buy a home, you may have to do renovations, you might have to do repairs, you're not in that home. Once you are residing in that home is the right time to submit that form. There is a deadline of June 1st to get this exemption for the whole year. That's not to turn in the paperwork. That's the deadline to fill the qualifications for the principal residence exemption.
Rob Scripture is with us, the Township Assessor here in West Bloomfield Township. More information on primary residency or your home assessment can be found on wbtownship.org. And Robbie mentioned it earlier on. Michigan law doesn't specify a certain period of time that you have to be living in a home for it to be declared a primary residence. I would imagine in the case of the primary residence exemption and maybe some other things that often will come across your desk, that can provide some ambiguity. And so how do you then interpret terms like occupancy or reside in assessments and ultimately in decisions being made by your department?
The good news is there is some guidance from the state. We do have these links on our website, and there's a 100-page document that the state of Michigan does provide not only the taxpayers, but to officials such as the assessor to review and see if the qualifications are being met. You are correct. There is a lot of gray area. There's a lot of circumstances for each individual PRE, but we do have to review the law as it's printed and interpreted.
More information again on all, and including the links to those documents on wbtownship.org. Rob Scripture is with us, the West Bloomfield Township Assessor, as we talk about this issue and connecting it to a recent story out of both West Bloomfield and Ann Arbor, where University of Michigan President Santa Ono is required to live out of the president's residence on campus in Ann Arbor, but also has a home here in West Bloomfield, declared that his primary residency, and that does have some tax implications. Rob, before we let you go, anything else that is on the docket over at the Assessor's Department that people in West Bloomfield should be keeping aware of at this time or at this time of the year?
Not at this time. In terms of the PRE or the principal residence exemption, I always encourage our residents to give us a call, to just have a basic discussion as to making sure that it's on your property. We do send assessment change notices and tax bills out, which state the principal residence exemption on your property. We are there to help. We are there to explain, and we're just a call away.
248-451-4850 is the number for the assessing department directly. 248-451-4850. There's not gotcha work that goes into this. There's a lot that goes into this on the backside of things for both homeowners and for our township here in West Bloomfield. So get the help that you need, get the questions you need answered Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. until 4:30. Rob, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.